Hello everyone and welcome to the Warwick F1 show. It's my first edition. Normally you'd have Will Kingswood in the hosting chair, but it's myself, Jack Rowe. Of course, Will Kingswood is here, the encyclopedia of Formula 1 himself. How hyped are you for this week?
I am. I think there's a lot of... that's the one thing that's come out of these sort of like last two seasons is just the amount of new races we've had. And I think it's almost better for the sport in a way that we have had these new races and just demonstrate that going to a lot of new tracks is a good idea.
Yeah, and of course we're joined in the studio as well by a guest from Warwick F1 Society, Thomas Loubeyres.
Hello everyone, happy to be here. First time in the recording studio, so yeah, really looking forward to it and looking forward to all of your picks.
Yeah, so we haven't actually explained what's going on, have we? So throughout the next 2 hours, I know, prime time and everything, we'll be looking through all of the tracks that are new to the calendar in 2020 and 2021. So we'll go through the full list. We're going to go through, are you ready for it? Mugello, Nurburgring, Imola, Portimao, Turkey, Zandvoort, Miami and Jeddah. So there's going to be plenty of talking, plenty of flip-flopping between tracks. We're back with the Warwick F1 show, and we're going to start off with Mugello. So, of course, that's a track that hasn't been featured on the calendar this year, but in 2020, it provided a very interesting race, didn't it, Will?
Yes, so, I may as well just run through the race quickly. It was arguably, one of the most chaotic starts we've had in recent years. So, we got a start, Verstappen initially looking like he'd get a good getaway and maybe get ahead of the Mercedes, but he seemed to bog down. I think after the race it was revealed he had engine issues, but then that sort of caused a concertina into turn 3, and it's sort of like we lost 4 cars there. And then on the restart, we had one, like the craziest restart I can remember, where half the field thought the race had started, half the field was still slow. And we lost, I think, 6 or 7 cars into that crash. I know Romain Grosjean said that the front of the race was trying to kill them. Other than that, it was a fairly standard affair. I'd say it was a good track. It was a good race in the end, but I think probably hampered a bit just by the fact we lost so many cars right at the beginning.
Yeah, did you watch that race, Thomas? Or?
Yes, I did. What a race, I must say. Up and downs. Like, the first part of the race, I was standing up. I just really couldn't believe what was happening, honestly. But yes, a lot of talk about, so I'll give it back to you, Jack, now.
Yeah, so we're not here for the racing specifically, are we? We're here for the tracks, but it's really hard to ignore that. I felt like we just had to go through what happened last year. Mugello, That's a really unexpected one for the calendar, I think. When we saw that we were going to have loads of new races, you were thinking your Nürburgrings, your Hockenheims, where we've been before. But what did you think when Mugello came up on the calendar?
For me, as a avid MotoGP watcher, I was really happy to see Mugello back. Plus, I believe it was Ferrari's 1000th race. Was it the case? Yeah. And so it was really enjoyable to see it back, obviously in Italy, home of Formula 1, a lot will say. So yeah, I was really looking forward to it, even though obviously it was unproven in Formula 1 at the time.
Yeah, and of course, as you mentioned, the third race in Italy that year, is that... do you have an issue with that? Because I'm just going to go for it. I have an issue with that. I like it when we have one race per country. Is that what are your opinions on that, Will?
I think that obviously last year was quite an extraordinary year in terms of just getting the races in. I think obviously because Europe seemed to be either doing better with the pandemic or more willing to still host events than a lot of the more traditional countries we're used to, like China. I know we're not going back to Japan this year a second time. So in an exceptional circumstance, I was fine with it. And especially because, as we'll come on to, I do think the track is quite a good one.
Yeah, as we've said before, it's a MotoGP track, very undulating, but it proved pretty well for F1. Let's give a rating out of 10 first, and then we'll come back to deciding whether it was good enough to go on our own custom calendars later on. What do you reckon, Thomas? Out of 10?
Out of 10, I'd give it a solid 7, honestly. I did like it. I mean, I was a bit scared because obviously, as you said, it's a MotoGP track. MotoGP always provided good racing. I wasn't sure with the big Formula 1 cars, but I mean, there are ups and downs, and I do, as you said, really like tracks with high undulation. So yeah, solid 7, and I do hope to see it again on a calendar in a future year.
Yeah, why do you think we didn't go back there? Was it the quality of the racing? Is it just something to do with the surrounding atmosphere? What do you reckon?
I think you do come back to possibly the 3 races in Italy. Maybe just Mugello was the one that had to be cut. Obviously, you've got the history of Monza. We've got the recent history of Imola. I think that it sort of just got lost in the shuffle. But, I mean, if I'll give it my rating out of 10 now. I think I'd go probably a 7 as well. I'm looking at the track layout now. We've got, like, from turn 4 to turn, I think it's, like, 11, the cars were almost flat out. And I think the drivers especially appreciated the challenges of not having a runoff area. It was either gravel or grass, and we saw some of them get caught out. And I think it's a good driver's track. The racing was all right. It wasn't brilliant. I think, as I said before, probably a bit unlucky that we lost so many cars so early, because a race with 20 cars is much better than a race with 12. But I think a 7 is probably a fair result, and it is a track I would like to go back to in the future. Maybe if we do get a rolling calendar, which I've always been a big advocate for, and I think it could be an option that we do return to.
Yeah, I'm going to say the word of the day. I think it's going to be Herman Tilke's design philosophy. If you've got a drink at home, then we probably shouldn't encourage you to do anything with that. But moving on, so Tilke's got his very, very strong opinion about what you should do when there are fast tracks, which we've seen in Baku, and when there are slower tracks, which we see maybe in Abu Dhabi. And this kind of doesn't fit in with that. Is that what do you think to that? I mean, I'll start with you, Thomas. Would you agree with Herman Tilke? Is this something that's too dangerous? Is he pigeonholed into the kind of tracks that he's making, or should he be more adventurous, play a bit more with altitude and variation like we see at Mugello?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, with the kind of recent death, sadly, 1994 for Ayrton Senna, but even more recent with Jules Bianchi and everything, we're seeing the FIA really taking a stance on having very safe racing, and a way of doing that is, for example, adding chicanes or adding slow corners rather than the fast flowing sections we may have seen before. But I do think that, we'll get onto it afterwards, but tracks like Turkey had the perfect balance of both slow speed and high speed. And so, I feel like with the new 2022 regulations coming in, I think these fast flowing corners where cars will most likely be able to stay close to one another, I think those tracks should really provide good racing in the future. And so I'd like to see more of it in the coming years.
Okay, final word on Mugello from you. Are we going to see anything like this in new builds in the future, or are we stuck on our Tilkedromes, Will?
I think, to give a bit of credit to Tilke, he does work well. Or he works well if he's got good things to work with. We think to Austin, we think to Turkey, we think to Austin, Turkey, sort of Baku. If he's got a layout that can encourage good racing, if he's got that undulation, then he does build good circuits. But if we've got the flat circuits that unfortunately we are going to in just recent times, especially in the Middle East, then he does seem to struggle a bit more. I think you could see something like a Mugello being built. I just think there would be a bit more runoff area. So it depends. I think if Mugello was built now, it would have more runoff area, less gravel probably. But that's the charm of some of the old school circuits, like your Silverstones and your Belgiums. We get that variety essentially, and even though we might not like some of the things, we really, really do like some of the other things that we go to.
A very diplomatic answer, thank you. So yeah, I'm sure most of you have heard of the Nurburgring before. It's well known for its horrifically terrifying Nordschleife circuit, which F1 interestingly used to compete on. But yeah, in more recent years, it took a role swapping with Hockenheim as the German GP, and then it dropped out of the calendar altogether until the pandemic hit. 2020 Nurburgring. It was a decent race. Do you remember it well?
Yeah, I think one of the more boring races last year. We had, obviously, let me find it quickly, it was in October. So everyone was thinking, oh, it's going to be a wet race. It probably would have, if it had rained, it probably would have been like what we got in Belgium this year. But it was dry in the end, very cold, actually. And that was the thing that's sort of the most iconic thing about the race, which was, to be honest, fairly standard. The Mercedes, who were the only team in contention last year, Bottas retired halfway through or around the beginning of the race. Like Hamilton just driving off into the distance, and it's fairly standard. There wasn't really much going on. Daniel Ricciardo getting his first podium for Renault is probably the other thing I remember most about that race, but other than the cold weather, no one having any heat in their tyres, it was a fairly standard affair.
Yeah, I find it quite fairly interesting. Another recurring theme that I feel like is going to go on. Bad luck for George Russell as well. Do you happen to remember that well, or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was the thing. Raikkonen trying to overtake Russell, who was trying to overtake Vettel. Just understeering into the side of the Williams, and I mean, I'm not sure where Russell was at the time.
They were fairly near the back. I think it was P18 or P19 or something like that.
But yeah, another one actually. Now I've just remembered Alex Albon coming together with Danny Kvyat. The infamous "Why do they race me so hard?" comments. probably, and one of the factors that led to Red Bull dropping him at the end of the season. Yeah,
we'll come back to the track, and let's get started on ratings nice and early. Thomas, are you prepared for this? What would you reckon?
So as a rating for Nurburgring, I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Sadly, and nothing higher, in my opinion. The Dunlop hairpin right in Sector 2 is one of the more famous corners on the F1 calendar, but I don't think it provided good enough racing for it to be any higher, and it was, as you previously said, pretty much a procession for the 2020 Eiffel Grand Prix. It was called.
I think that's fairly harsh. I think there was a... What? I feel like you've got an opinion on this. Go for it. Will.
No, I think that's quite harsh. Obviously, we've been at the track before, unlike Mugello, so it was a fairly staple feature on the calendar in the early 2000s. We had like the legendary 2005 race where Raikkonen had a tyre blowout on the final lap trying to chase that win. And I think I'd say 4 is harsh. I think I'd give it like a 6. I'd say the first sector is very well built for side-by-side racing. I'm not sure if you saw that clip of, like, I think it was the DTM drivers, or it was like some touring car event, but there were 3 of them, and it was genuinely side-by-side for about 30 seconds. Like, one car drops back, but the other 2 are fighting, and the third car just comes in. It was such a good spectacle. I think the second sector's a bit dull, and then, like, the final sector's fine. I think the issue we had last year was that the cars were quite spread out, especially at the front, and especially when it's cold, it does make the racing a bit more difficult. So I think 4 is harsh. I think I'd give it about 6.
Yeah. What I will say, it's true that the first sector is a nice sector. I mean, we saw a lot of wheel-to-wheel action last year with, like, I believe Ricciardo driving around the outside. It's a nice combination of corners around the Mercedes arena. It's just the last sector I do have a problem with obviously the quick chicane then leading to a 180 turn into the straight, which doesn't enable the closest racing, and so there's not necessarily that many overtakes down in turn 1, with overtakes more being made in that Mercedes arena, which once again is, I must admit, a a nice sector. So maybe I was harsh with a 4, but I won't put anything higher than a 5 though.
Okay.
You've mentioned turn 1. Let's talk about it. The Nurburgring's got a fairly short start-finish straight. It's kind of not what we see nowadays. I don't want to say the dreaded name again, but would you like to see that extended? Do you see more of a because it's a hard breaking point, isn't it?
I think the problem is, I'm just looking at the track layout here, is you can't really go much further before you hit the track again, because it comes back on itself. I think that, to be honest, that turn 1 is one of the most unique corners I can think of. Just the way it drops down, the way it tightens up, and even though it makes the start finish straight like feel longer in a way, because it's not quite easy to dive on, but you can go for a move from a bit further back just because of the way the corner works. If you someone can dive up the inside and then the driver on the outside can switch back, and then that's how the first sector sort of comes in. So I think turn 1 is a fairly unique corner, and that's sort of there are a lot of I think to the Nurburgring, I think to races in the past, and I think we have had good races that sort of justify it being a bit better than a 4 or maybe even a 5.
Yeah, what I will say is it's true that turn 1 enables drivers to set up moves quite well, but I find it similar to Hungary in a way, with the long 180 corner, final corner, and then the pit straight. My problem is with that chicane. If that chicane didn't exist, I think there would be different ways to enter the final corner, which would maybe enable overtaking on the straight. But because of that chicane, everyone's coming out of it the same way and kind of entering the final corner on a similar trajectory. That doesn't enable the good racing Hungary does on the pit straight. So maybe if we did get rid of that chicane and just a small kink instead, maybe it would enable better racing.
I think we should just take the chicane and then go left, and let's go back to the Nordschleife.
Let's talk about that. You've read my mind already. Very quickly before that, what was your rating again, Will? What did you say? 6. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the Nordschleife. I say we. F1 has raced there before, and I know, anybody can tell you it's not going to be safe, you're not going to have enough marshals, but would you, ignoring all the practicalities, like to see it or not?
The problem is you can't really ignore the practicalities. It is incredibly unsafe. So we raced, I think it was from 55 to 76. Definitely 76 was the last race there, with Niki Lauda's accident, and I think that put paid to any hopes of returning. The Nordschleife is the most unique track in the world. It's 20 kilometers long. We'd have a 14-lap race. It's not that wide. It wouldn't be good racing. I don't think we can't return there. I would I'd love to see one day let's every year get maybe an F1 car, one of these generation F1 cars, to go around the track and see how fast they can do it. Because obviously we've had the 919 Evo go around it. I think it's about 5 minutes. I want to see once these cars are done, because these are probably the quickest cars in F1 history we're ever going to get now.
Debatable, for sure. Okay,
that we can think of. Who knows what will happen in the future? But
maybe for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Sure.
I want to see these cars with their downforce, with their engine speed. I want to see at least one of them go around the Nurburgring, or the Nordschleife, sorry. But I don't think we're ever going to return, and I probably don't think we should.
Yeah, I must say, such a long lap too. Imagine if you were a spectator having to wait 7 minutes or 6 minutes maybe to see the cars go by again. I must say, there are the Nurburgring 24 hours that race on the Nordschleife, so it's not as if racing doesn't exist. It just exists in different forms. So it's unlikely to see we're unlikely to see the Nordschleife coming in again. Even though maybe a one-off event, just a historic Grand Prix. Why not? I'd love to see that.
Okay, one last suggestion. Have you guys heard of a Rowe race?
I have heard, yes.
Okay. In theory, it's AI-driven cars. if you could get 24 of them, obviously that removes the safety. Maybe you don't have. I mean, do you remove marshals at that point? No, I'm not sure. Obviously, they're very much in early stages. But would you see them go around the Nordschleife?
Maybe. I think you obviously mentioned the 24 hours. I think at that point it's just the speed of the cars. Like, I think I watched a Tom Scott video a few weeks ago where he went round it in I think it was a AMG GT3.
Yeah.
And that it just looks terrifying. So I can't imagine what it would be like. I think the last time an F1 car went round it was Nick Heidfeld in a 2006 BMW, and I don't think that it would be safe. I would like to see maybe just like, as I mentioned before, a time trial, but I just don't think that at that speed it's getting a bit extreme. Maybe Formula E can go around it. We have a two lap race and they pit halfway through.
Okay, so we've got a rating of... We'll come back to the normal Nurburgring, the GP circuit. We've got a rating of 4 and a rating of 6. Welcome back to the Warwick F1 show on Raw 12:51 AM. Previously, we talked about the Nurburgring, and now we're going to go straight into the races that are still taking place in 2021, starting with Imola. And let's talk about the 2021 race. 2020 races... It was a while ago, but I guess notable incidents include George Russell crashing out of 10th. But the 2021 race, would you agree, Will, that was a better one?
Yeah. So we obviously, I was getting confused there because obviously we had the 2020 race where George Russell crashed out in 10th, and then we had the 2021 race where he repeated the feat trying to overtake Valtteri Bottas on what had been a wet track. So I think we were all quite surprised to have a wet race so early in the season, but the heavens opened just before the race started, and we got our first bit of first blow between Verstappen and Hamilton, really, when they came together at turn 2. Came together at turn 2 into that chicane. Other than that, just it was a sort of wet to dry race, really. We obviously had the Bottas Russell incident, and we also had Hamilton going off the track at Tosa. Like, we saw first almost mistake we've seen from him in a long time at that point, going off the track, colliding with the barrier, and I guess you have to say sort of getting away with it, that the Bottas-Russell incident came in and didn't put him a lap down, which meant he was able to make his way back up from, I think it was 6th, and get back to 2nd place and keep the gap between him and I think it was 9th. I think it was 9th. Hang on, let me check. I feel
All right,
like he hadn't dropped down that far.
He's the F1 encyclopedia. I called him at the start of the show, but
this is entirely.
Can I leave you to that, and we'll come to Thomas. What do you reckon of the last? We'll go for 2 years of races. Both of them were wet in the. They were both wet in the end at some point, weren't they? Do you think that's made the racing better, or is the track just pretty good?
Yeah, I mean, I must say, wet races in F1 do normally tend to give better spectacles. So it's always hard to judge when you haven't seen a dry race, at least in 2021. What I remember of the 2021 qualifying is Lando nearly putting it on pole, Lando Norris, but goes wide just fractionally, and ends up, I think, in 7th position for the quali. I will say that Imola has always been a hard track to overtake on, and so rain helped with that, with obviously so many different incidents. Will, do you have the numbers again? I
was wrong, and Jack was right this time. So yeah, Hamilton coming back from 9th. To be fair, a fairly impressive recovery, even though this season, obviously, especially at the start of this season, the Mercedes and the Red Bull have been quite a way ahead, but I will concede I was wrong there.
That's it. Next week you have to introduce me as the F1 encyclopedia. But The point remains the same. It was a good race, both because we had a title contender in trouble, and what do you reckon? Do you think it's a good circuit, or do you think we got a bit lucky?
I think it is a good circuit. I think it's also probably not a good circuit for the current F1 cars. I think, as we all know and don't love, the cars are probably too wide. That's going to be fixed next year. And if we do go back there, I think it will be a better track. But if you look back to the races in the past, you have some very good races because the track is a bit narrower than a lot of the new ones. So overall, I'd probably give it a 7 again. Like Mugello, I think it's got some iconic corners. Even like still Tamarello's still quite an iconic corner. Obviously, it had to be like neutered a bit from the fast left-hander that it was before Senna's tragic death. But I think there's enough that remains from the old circuit. You've got Tosa, Piratella, Acqua Minerale, Ravazza going onto the front, or the front, yeah, I guess the pit straight.
You've named all the corners on the track.
I have named every corner. But I think that sort of says a lot about that. It's a bit like a Belgium, that you've got a lot of iconic corners. So I think I'd give it a 7.
Yeah, what I will say is F1 drivers love driving on that track. I mean, you heard countless team ragers just saying, I love this track. And the elevation changes in the last half of the circuit are absolutely incredible when you get to the Variante Alta and then Ravazza, obviously. It's just such a beautiful track to drive on, and obviously a very historic one for good and for bad, obviously. But I think it will forever be an important part of F1 history. And I think for that reason, I'd have to give it, as Wolf said, a 7 or even maybe an 8. No, I'll keep it at 7 for now because it has so much history and F1 drivers just love driving on it.
Okay, what do you reckon they're going to think next year? Is this F1 drivers loving it because it's just there's less action? Are they loving it because it's a brilliant circuit? Are they going to hate it a bit more when people are chucking it up and inside in a 2022 car, which hopefully will be able to follow more?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I just think the nature of the track with those elevation changes is what F1 drivers just love. When you go down to Acqua Minerale so quickly, that very quick right-hander, I think all F1 drivers just live for those moments, and obviously a lot of them have grown up, well, the older ones have grown up like with Imola very much in their mind. And obviously if the new F1 cars manage to follow a lot more, we'll hopefully see a lot more overtakes around the Variante Villeneuve, for example. So I really think, I'm really hoping this Imola stays on the calendar for a long time to come.
Okay, last point, and I want both of your opinions on it. The curbs there, are they too much, or is it too dangerous for and I guess it's about track limits as well. What do you reckon?
I think they're fine. I think obviously you've got the Hamilton-Verstappen rivalry. If the curbs are going to come into play, maybe we do need to flatten them out a bit more, but we'll come on to tracks like Turkey. I think Turkey's got a few curbs that have caused a few jumps in the past, but they're there. I don't think they're too dangerous. I do think what happened in Monza was not a one-off, but very unlikely to happen. And now we have got the halo. It sort of not reduces the consequences, but there's sort of another level of safety that comes in from the potential danger of having like these high curbs.
Yeah, I must say, I think it adds to Imola that it's such an unforgiving track, and that's why I think drivers also like it. It's because you can really test the limits, and unlike a Kota where you can go wide by about 2 miles, here you really need to always keep it on track. So I don't think it's dangerous. I think it's just about right. It punishes the driver if they go off, but it's fair, and yeah, I do hope they don't change it for security concerns or anything.
Okay, there we go. Imola, as I'd like to repeat, Thomas said earlier, it's a track that has history, both good and bad. Hello and welcome back. Previously, we were talking about Imola, the second of the Italian races we're mentioning, and we're going to stay in Europe for a little bit, and we're going to go to Portugal and Portimao. Now, this year's race, a little bit of a forgettable one. It was Bot, I think. Was it the first time we had that this year? It might be the only time as well. Can you remember much of it, Will?
No. I want to say I didn't watch it. I can't. Wow. When was
Excuses. That was race 4 or 5 of the season.
So I think I might have missed both of the Portuguese ones. I either watched it and forgot about it. I definitely didn't watch last year. It's not that I didn't watch last year. It's just I thought it started an hour after it did, and I missed the best bit because in 2020 we had an absolutely chaotic first lap. With, I think, it was because the tyres, no one really knew what the tyres were going to do. And it was a lot colder, I think, than a lot of people expected. And we had, like, Carlos Sainz got into the lead. Kimi Raikkonen, I think, went from P18 to P8. Or no, it might have been, like, 15th to 5th or something like that. He gained about 11 positions. But then, even in 2020, it settled down. Hamilton taking his 92nd win, passing the record of Michael Schumacher. And, again, winning this year in as you say, a bit of a forgettable affair.
Yeah, I think you've got some highlights up, Thomas. Can you run us through a few things that happened?
Yes, of the 2021 Grand Prix, I must say the highlights are very short. But Valtteri Bottas actually put it on pole. Only pole this season for the Finn. Raikkonen crashed into the back of Antonio Giovinazzi just looking at his dash and just hadn't realised Giovinazzi had hit the brakes and just collides into the back of him. And an important thing to note is Nikita Mazepin also receiving a 5-second time penalty for ignoring blue flags, which no one is surprised about at this point. But yes, those were basically the highlights of the race. If not, as Jack said, it was Hamilton, Verstappen, Bottas, which we got quite accustomed to back in 2020 already. So yes, not the most eventful race in 2021.
So the question, and I think I've asked it pretty much every time in some way or another, is that the track's fault, or is that just bad luck?
In my opinion, it's a good track. I do like Portimao a lot. Elevation change, obviously. The way the track just really swoops back down on the pitch straight is really nice. And I believe, I don't play the F1 game myself, but there has been a lot of love for the new edition of Portimao on the 2021 F1 game. So I do believe it's a very nice track. It resembles Catalonia in many ways, but I just think it's a better version of it, and the swooping last corner is one of the most beautiful corners on the calendar, in my humble opinion. So I do very much like the track.
I was a bit nervous then. You said it was a copy of Catalonia while you were praising it. I was well, I thought we might have to take some time out and work out what was going on with that. What do you reckon, Will? Same question. Was that just bad luck, or do you think it's do you think it's the track that's the problem?
It's an interesting one because you look at the track and it looks like spectacular. You've got the undulation, the elevation changes, some of the camera angles are wonderful. But then we've been there twice now, and it's not really lived up to, I guess, what everyone was thinking it was going to be. Don't know if that's the cars. I don't know if there's something about the track that maybe like in the final sector it's difficult to follow. It is a bit confusing, really, because like on the face of it, that track looks like a really good one for racing, but it doesn't really seem to have, or it hasn't delivered so far. And I think if we're going straight into our top 10s, I think I'd maybe have to give this a 5 almost, but just because it flatters to deceive, essentially. It looks really good, but there hasn't really been any evidence that it produces good racing. And is it just the undulation? Because if this track was flat, maybe we'd think a lot differently of it.
What do you reckon? Is that contentious for you, Thomas? I can see you smiling over there.
For me, I mean, you're ranking the Nurburgring higher than Portimao. And for me, I don't agree. I'll give Portimao a 6. obviously the racing hasn't been great, and to me too, it's a bit of an enigma as to why the racing hasn't been as good as we might have expected. But let's leave it time. I do like it. I do like the elevation changes. I repeat it a lot, but those are the tracks I like the most. So I'll give it a 6 for now, but it might go higher if the racing improves.
Okay, so one interesting point that we've not mentioned yet, but we've mentioned the opposite coin of that with previous tracks, is Portimao is, you wouldn't think of it, but it's a really recent track. I think it was finished in 2008, and surprisingly, again, for a track that's being used in F1, that was built recently, not designed by our man Herman Tilke. It's more flowing, there's grass, but it's failed to produce interesting races. So we're gonna properly dive into it now. Is that it? Okay. Here's the question: if you gave that, the surrounding area to Herman Tilke, would he have done a better job? I'll start with you, Will.
It's hard to it's almost like we wouldn't be in that area if it was a Herman Tilke track. He'd find something a bit less challenging to deal with. But if we were forced to be in that area, I think Tilke would have built something as good, because I think you have to work it's basically like an artist being given a perfect place to draw. If you're doing a landscape setting, it's like they've been given the most beautiful landscape in the world, and then told to paint something good. It's surely he would have recognised the potential he had in these rolling hills and things like that, and would have built something good. Because Herman Tilke can build good tracks. We've seen that in Bahrain, Malaysia, that's obviously, unfortunately, not on the calendar now. We've seen it in, I guess, even China's quite a good track. Baku is one of his more recent ones that he's worked well with the streets of the city. So he can build tracks, but he's either very hit or very miss. So, but I do think that if he had been given this undulation, this elevation, that I do think he would have built a good track. So I think if Tilke had got it, I think we would have got a good track.
I do believe it is still a good track, and if Tilke had built it, I think there would have been a lot of love for it, and not that much hate. Obviously, as I was saying earlier, it's a bit like the Catalunya circuit, which that track has received a lot of hate in the past. But I do think the elevation changes makes it so much of a better track. So I'm just happy we're seeing a circuit in Portugal, which I believe is the country that was missing before. Obviously, it doesn't have the greatest Formula 1 history, but seeing as we've got Spain, I feel like Portugal was the next country in the Iberian region we really had to see. So I'm happy that we do have this track in the Algarve.
Okay, last question. We're going to have to take a quick break. You said you're a MotoGP fan, Tom.
Yeah.
Estoril or Portimao, what would you rather see on the MotoGP calendar?
Ooh. I feel like... So I'll give the recency bias to Portimao. Obviously, we've been racing on it, and it has provided... if someone wants to talk, let me just check at the rankings of the classification of Portimao in MotoGP, but I feel like because MotoGP is more installed in the Portuguese in Portugal, I'm much happier to see a MotoGP race there than I would seeing an F1 race there. I know it doesn't answer your question, Jack. I'm just trying to find the race results. But honestly, it's a very hard one. Something that I'd need to think about more, because Estoril, I must say, obviously has a lot of history, and in many ways it's quite similar and also quite similar to Catalonia. So I'd still say Portimao is a good circuit just for that undulation change. And I must say, seeing MotoGP riders going down for that first corner is something absolutely incredible. So I'd give it to Portimao still.
Okay, any opinions, Will, or are you...
I don't watch enough MotoGP,
Okay.
but I do find it interesting that a lot of the circuits that work for MotoGP might... Oh, sorry, I just got something caught in my throat at the moment, but may not work for F1 because obviously you've got the fast-flowing corners and especially at the moment it's quite difficult to follow. But I think we keep the Portuguese Grand Prix on the calendar because at the very least it keeps another Middle East track off the calendar.
Hello and welcome back to Raw 12:51 AM. We're into the second half of the show. That's the Warwick F1 show, if you weren't listening about 5 minutes ago, with my guests Will and Thomas. And we're talking about Turkey. Of course, the race coming up this weekend on Sunday. But we're not here to talk about the race. We're here to talk about the track. So, somewhat... I know both of you have got the... I'm sure you remember last year, but I'll go for you, Will. Run us through what happened.
Best race of the season. Don't at me. It was. So the track, it was sort of made by the weather. It was a wet weekend, or at least a wet Saturday and Sunday, which are the ones that matter, and also the track circuit, which had been recently relaid and had the same grip as your average ice rink. So on Saturday, Lance Stroll got his first pole position with Verstappen in second and Perez in third. But Sunday, we had the two racing points drive out into the lead. Unfortunately, it didn't end well for Stroll in the end, who fell back to ninth. But a race that was categorised by a lot of spins, so I think all drivers made mistakes. Hamilton making a mistake into turn 9 on the first lap. Verstappen spinning at turn 11 a few laps later. Albon spinning, I think Vettel, Leclerc, I think everyone took a spin at some point, but eventually Hamilton got into the lead, won by 30 seconds and clinched his 7th world title. Behind him was Sergio Perez, who also made a one-stop strategy on 50-lap old intermediates work. And for his only podium appearance of the season, Sebastian Vettel, getting up to third after Leclerc made a mistake on the final lap at turn 12, who then finished in fourth. Verstappen and Albon finishing in the lower half of the points, while Bottas had a terrible race, spinning 5 times and eventually obviously losing the title at that race to Lewis Hamilton.
Wow, did you get a breath in there?
No.
It was a good race, wasn't it, Thomas?
Oh, absolutely unbelievable race. Obviously, as Will mentioned, the weather conditions really enabled it to be absolutely amazing. However, I must say that it wasn't only the weather conditions. I feel like Istanbul as a track is also really good, and as Will said, Hamilton clinched his 7th world title in what was maybe one of his greatest ever drives. I think he'd put it up there. I mean, the car control he had, just really incredible drive by him, very mature, as you would expect from a 7-time world champion.
Okay, thank you. So that's the racing, that's not the track. So, I mean, yeah, you said already, Will, that a lot of the chaos came because the track was being resurfaced. We've had news that it's been water blasted. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah,
so
you
it
go.
has been water blasted to prevent 2020 drama repeat.
Boo.
Is this going to make the track a bit more drivable, or is it just going to make it way more boring?
To be honest, it's very hard to say. You could gauge nothing from the track last year. It's not like in Imola where we sort of knew who was good, who was bad. Like, this will be a completely different race. So, I mean, looking back at the Turkish Grand Prix, I think it came onto the calendar in 2006. Left it, I think it was about 2006. Left it in 2011 before obviously returning last season and coming back onto the calendar. It wasn't actually, I think it was meant to be a lot earlier in the year, but before getting cancelled because Turkey was on the UK's red list. But obviously it came back with the cancellation. I think it was of the Japanese Grand Prix. Yeah. So I mean, I'll just dive straight into my rating. I'd probably give it a 7 as well. Looking at like the layout's good. We've got obviously the fantastic Turn 8, which has been emulated on a lot of tracks in the past, most notably I think it's 13, 14, 15, 16 at Kota. So just the four curbs, four apexes, corner going into 9 and 10, which is slow, onto the back straight, which is a long one, so that's good for overtaking. So yeah, I think I'd probably give it a 7 as well, same as Mugello and Imola.
Go on then, Thomas. Go for your rating.
I'll jump right into my rating. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. In my opinion, it's the greatest Tilke track. I absolutely adore the track layout. Turn 8 is such an incredible corner, but people forget about the elevation changes all throughout. The incredibly long Turn 2 is also a great corner. I absolutely adore that track. No track is perfect, so I can't give it a 10, sadly, but a 9 is fully deserved, in my opinion.
You're an absolute sucker for that one then, aren't you?
Yes,
good.
incredibly.
You looking forward to the race this weekend, I assume?
Yes, I'm really, really looking forward to it. Hopefully Hamilton and Verstappen will both be in the 2 first positions if Hamilton doesn't take his engine penalty. So yeah, really looking forward to that.
Good, lovely. Any last words, Will, on Turkey?
No, not really. Cool. I mean, I think my favourite thing from last year was just seeing Danny Kvyat drift it. Like, it was proper Tokyo drift through like 12 or 13. But I can see like it is a good track. It's a very good track. I wouldn't say it's maybe my favourite Tilke one. I think Bahrain. I think I'd have to put Bahrain up there, especially with some of the races we've had in the past. But I think maybe I was a bit harsh. Maybe I think it's borderline for me between a 7 and an 8 for this one.
What I will say is, sadly, Istanbul Park is in a country that doesn't watch F1 enough, and that's its main issue, I feel. That's why it kind of left the calendar, sadly, in 2011. It's because they couldn't pack the circuit, sadly. But other than that, it's an absolutely beautiful track. And yeah, words can't describe how much I love it.
Talking of tracks that might be on the calendar because they're in countries that watch F1, we'll be back after the break with Zandvoort. Zandvoort. Will, go.
It's not a good track. I'm sorry. It's not. It's a qualifying track. We get those. There are tracks on the calendar that are for qualifying. There's Monaco and now Zandvoort. It's not. The race was boring. It was. If you're a Max Verstappen fan, sure, it was a wonderful race because he got the win. But it was a boring race. I had a power cut. For the first half of it, and I still didn't want to watch it or catch up. It was just dull. It's not a good track for racing, and I think that is one of my biggest things. It has to be a good track for racing. Sure, it's great for qualifying. Everyone can go round it really quickly, but I'm gonna give it a 3. Because it's not a good track for racing.
Brutal.
That's what we're here for. We're here for racing, and it's not good for racing.
Wow. Strong opinion there, I must say. I don't have as strong opinions about Zandvoort. I do really appreciate its banking. I feel like it's quite unique in that. I won't even try to pronounce the corner names, but I just love the banking of turn 3. And I also like the long turn 4, turn 5. It's quite flowing. Obviously, it doesn't enable the greatest racing, but it's a very flowing track, which I do thoroughly enjoy. And hopefully, with the new regulations, as I always go back to, the racing will be closer. But I will say Zandvoort might have been one of the worst, if not the worst, race in 2021.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. Monaco. We all forget how terrible that Monaco Grand Prix was.
I'm a big fan of Monaco, so I won't say any more. But as for my ranking, I feel like it's still unproven, seeing as though we're still with the old cars, so I'd give it a 5. And I'll also say the atmosphere is absolutely incredible. Obviously, being the Dutch Grand Prix just next to Amsterdam, like the Dutch fans obviously all love Mac. The Orange Army is absolutely incredible. We've all seen those images with the flares and the drivers nearly not being able to see the racetrack in front of them, just covered in orange. So I do think the atmosphere is absolutely incredible, and I am happy we are seeing a Grand Prix in the Netherlands.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because most of the tracks we've introduced so far have been on the calendar because of the pandemic. But that Zandvoort is not one of those. It was introduced or attempted to be introduced with Vietnam, I think.
Yeah.
And it's remained on the calendar. So do you think? Because I mean, we've seen. Let's briefly mention it. Qatar's got a 10-year. A 10-year license with them already. Is that just because it's in the Middle East and they've got money? Is that something they're going to do with Zandvoort as well?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel F1 fans can be a bit too not two-faced, but a bit hypocritical, because this track is back on the calendar because of the money potential F1 can make from the fact that Max Verstappen is such an icon in the Netherlands. Is that they will make money. They're going to have full grandstands every year, assuming Verstappen's, even if he's not in a good car. The fact that he is good now, they will have fans back. Obviously, we've had this track before. It left the calendar in 1985 was the last race. I do think the cars are too quick for it. It might get improved by the 2022 regulations. But if we're going to criticise going to Qatar for the money it makes, I think you've got to, if we completely exclude, which obviously you can't, like the wider context of the scenario, I'm fine with going everywhere as long as it's got good racing. Like, F1 fans don't really criticise Bahrain despite its human rights questionable, like the questionable human rights there, because we get a good race at Bahrain almost every year, whereas like somewhere like Russia and Abu Dhabi, because we don't normally get good races, the wider context comes into question a lot more. So I'm fine with being at Zandvoort. It is a good atmosphere. I just don't think it's a good track, or at least not a good track at the moment, especially with these cars.
Yeah, I mean, I will say it's one of those tracks you do want to go to, though, just for the atmosphere. And I feel like this is, I mean, as you said, Will, it's the main selling point. There's so many Dutch Verstappen fans. And so I'm just hoping it does stay on the calendar and we do see good racing, because it's it is a dangerous track. Obviously, all F1 tracks are Grade A, and so everything is done for the safety of the drivers and of the marshals. But it is a very dangerous and punishing track. We've seen it with, for example, Latifi going off in qualifying, I believe, quite a big shunt for him. So I understand your point in that it hasn't provided good racing as of yet, but the back corners of Turn 3 and even Turn 13 is something we haven't really seen in Formula 1, at least recently. And so just for that alone, its uniqueness on the F1 calendar is something to really enjoy.
Yeah.
Have you given it a rating yet, Thomas?
Yes, I gave it a 5.
Okay. All right. I've got an idea to improve the track.
Right.
IndyCar. Okay, yes, it's in the Netherlands, but we ignore all practicalities. Would it be a good track if you ran IndyCars on it? Will?
That's a good question, and I think it's sort of something we're almost going to answer next year, because we are slowing the cars down, less downforce, more ground effect, which is, I think, I don't watch IndyCar that much, but I imagine that's what the IndyCars are a bit more like. So I think it's I think we've got to wait and see. Obviously, we've had 1 year of the race. It was not a good race. No one can deny that. If you are denying that, you're deluded. But we've got next year. I think that the cars, they're changing so much next year. So I think we almost go into the next season, the tracks, with a bit of a blank slate, apart from, I don't know, Sochi. Because Sochi's terrible. And only got improved by the rain and the fact all the fast cars were at the back.
Yeah, well, it's been an interesting year. Paul Ricard's not on the calendar next year, is it?
I think it is.
I thought they were moving it.
I'm not sure.
I'll check that
God.
now.
You check.
I've thrown the cat among the pigeons now, haven't I? I guess I'll keep talking. But this year's been pretty good for tracks that we traditionally think are bad, and I remember saying that last week because we were talking about Sochi, I don't know whether that. I don't know whether we've forgotten Zandvoort when we talk about that, or whether people just didn't think it was going to be that bad.
I think there's a bit of blinkers on because it's a Verstappen victory. I think, especially when you get a bit of Hamilton dominance, it's very quick to say that, oh, this track's terrible. And especially because France was a heartland of Mercedes during their glory years, like the 2019.
Are these not their glory years?
No, but the 2019-20 where they had sort of shrugged off the Ferrari dominance and had gone back to like being the one true car. But I saw an interesting video that said France isn't necessarily a bad track. It's just because it's got all types of corner, it exacerbates differences. So let's be honest, when it came onto the calendar in 18, we were at a point where the cars were so spread out. Like, the top three were miles ahead of the midfield. I think even the midfield was fairly spread out. But now you've got the racing is a lot closer. You've got the two top teams, but you've got one and even possibly two teams that are fairly close to the top two. And even like the next three, the AlphaTauri, the Aston Martin, and the Alpine, can all get up there into the podium position.
The A team. It's the A team.
Wait.
No.
Oh no, but just even.
I'm joking. I'm making a joke.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't get it. But even now, like we've got because the teams are closer. I think it just makes every race better.
Yeah. So I've got the information here.
Excellent.
So a leaked version of the proposed 22 race calendar was leaked a week and a half ago, and it looks like Imola is set to nudge Paul Ricard off the Formula One calendar. So there's still that race weekend where we're still not sure if it'll be Imola, Paul Ricard. If I can just give my opinion on it, I have always, as you've seen, I very much like Imola. It's a driver's track, but what I will say is we do need a French Grand Prix on the calendar. I mean, I'm half French myself. I went to a 2018 French Grand Prix, actually. So obviously I've got a bit of bias. But I do feel like France is one of the countries where motorsport is the biggest. We've got Ocon, we've got Gasly, two French drivers on the grid. So I feel like we do still need a French Grand Prix in 2022. So hopefully Paul Ricard stays. Plus, it didn't give us a bad race in 2021 either.
It is the home of historical motorsport, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going to lean into this. We've forgotten what we're meant to be talking about, but I don't really care because I want to talk about Le Mans. Now that you mention it, I think did we mention this last week? I don't know how we would have, or was it 2 weeks ago?
I don't think we spoke about Le Mans at any point.
Maybe not. Maybe I was just speaking to someone else. As far as I can remember, the Circuit de la Sarthe, obviously not a possibility with F1 cars. It'd be a bit much with those straights. But the Bugatti circuit, I think, is grade 2 FIA.
I think it might be grade 1. I know we've raced at the Bugatti circuit before. I think oh god, now this is really testing my knowledge. I want to say 68. Let me find it.
All right, we've got both people looking up stuff, but I'm just going to continue to extol the benefits of going to Le Mans. Starting with the fact that it's not actually that far away from Paris. Northern France is pretty good for population-wise. Obviously, you've got the massively historical 24-hour or 24 Heures de Le Mans. Probably, yeah.
24 Heures du Mans.
It was 67. I was 1 year out.
Oh no, that's disappointing. You're fired.
Oh come on! I'd got it close, to be fair. I knew it was late 60s. I just didn't know what year it was. But if I recall, the racing wasn't brilliant then. But obviously, those were 60 cars. It's a bit different. I still think we could I don't know. Circuit de la Sarthe, it's not an impossibility, I would say. I would say it's more or less, it's less safety, because it's a bit smaller than the Nordschleife, obviously, that's not difficult. Like, there are moons smaller than the Nordschleife. But it's more that it would just kill the engines. Like, that long straight, you're running at what? Like 11,000 RPM, gear 8. You need an engine for the weekend. Like, and these days, I don't think that would be a possibility.
Yeah, what I will say is we're talking about Circuit de la Sarthe here, Le Mans, but why not Magny-Cours? I mean, F1 used to race on it, obviously, back in the early 2000s, and I do think it's quite a nice circuit. I mean, I think it's worth a try if Paul Ricard doesn't stay and we want to really spice things up. I wouldn't be against the return of Magny-Cours. It provided good racing. Obviously, Schumacher was one of the greatest drivers around that track. He's won it on countless occasions. So I would like to see a return of Magny-Cours personally, if I can weigh in on this where should the French GP take place debate.
Okay, that's our fourth suggestion. We've got obviously the original Paul Ricard. We've got the Bugatti circuit at Le Mans and the full circuit at Le Mans, and then Magny-Cours as well. We're going to take a break now and probably get back on scheduled programming with talking about Miami and Jeddah. We're going to lump them in together because we don't really know what the racing is going to be like. And then after that, of course, I'm going to get these two to make their own calendar, essentially. And we're back, and we're almost done. We just got 2 new tracks to go, and they're the ones that are being introduced this year. Well, other than Zandvoort, that's Jeddah, and the one that will be coming in 2022, I think it is, which is Miami. So I've lumped these in together because we've got the track layout for both of them, and barely anything else. Have you guys both seen the track layouts for both?
Yeah. So I've got the track layout here. I guess I'll start with. Actually, we'll start with the race that's going on this year, Jeddah. I would encourage everyone to get the track layout up at the moment and look at how terrible it is. F1 has had especially, I'm really surprised this is a Tilke track, because Tilke's always had the philosophy of slow corners good for overtaking, fast corners bad. And that does seem to be how it works. It's difficult to overtake through fast corners. You don't really have that overspeed and things like that. But this Jeddah street circuit is the quickest, I want to say the quickest street circuit we've ever had. And it's one of the quickest circuits on the calendar. They were thinking average speeds of 250 kilometers an hour. 27 corners, of which I'm pretty sure about 23 or 4 could basically be taken flat out. I can't see much overtaking here. And I think it'll be a terrible race.
Okay, conspiracy theory. Tilke knows more about what's coming both next year with the new cars and, okay, really conspiracy theory, the next generation of cars as well. He either thinks or knows they're going to keep getting more and more towards the overtaking, and he's designing a circuit for that, for having 2 cars running alongside for half a lap or 2/3 of a lap. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I must say, I mean, the Jeddah street circuit is so narrow. Like, as you said, Will, 27 corners, very narrow. So I do hope he has in mind the 2022 regulations, because I can't see the F1 race this year to be anything else but a complete ball fest. Qualifying might be interesting. I mean, it's always spectacular seeing cars go so fast through narrow corners, but I do believe the race itself will be a procession. I can only really see 2 possible overtaking zones, which is the kind of final hairpin turn 27, and then the kind of chicane turn 1, which isn't great, because why would you ever start with a chicane which has never really enabled much overtaking to start off with? So I don't understand the logic of such a circuit. Obviously, I know it's in Saudi Arabia, and F1 has links with Saudi Aramco, so I understand why it's in Saudi Arabia. I just personally just don't like the circuit whatsoever.
I mean, it can be anywhere. As if it's a good track, you can plonk it anywhere and it will produce a good race. I think the bit I'm most interested about is 17 to about 22. Will that be flat? And if that's flat, because it's sort of like, it's not a straight, there's about 5 different corners on it, but it's all flat out, so they might chuck a DRS zone there. Obviously we'll get one from 27 to 1 because it's start finish straight, but it really depends. I don't know. I mean, we're going to say this and it's going to be the best race of the season somehow.
It's well, if it was this year, I might agree with you. We'll have to see. Oh, sorry, it is this year. What am I talking about? Oh my god, I'm getting ahead of myself. Or is it? Maybe my mistake was a big brain play all along, because there is some doubt. I had a point to make, but we're running with it. So I had a we've seen pictures on Twitter of the state of the track, and it's not quite racing circuit ready, is it, Thomas?
Well, I mean, that's a big understatement. It's just gravel right now. There is no track that exists. You see machines, kind of just dirt everywhere. Just no tarmac has been placed. And seeing as though it's supposed to take place in between December 3rd to December 5th, they still have 2 months to complete it. So it really is a race against time for them. Obviously, it's the penultimate round, so it is an important race. Maybe we'll see the F1 Championship being decided at Jeddah and not at Abu Dhabi. So, yeah, I mean, it's really a race against time for them. So I'm really unsure whether it will take place. And if it doesn't take place, well, I guess we'll just have to cut it and not be able to replace it and just have Qatar followed by Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We've also got a little bit of I'm not sure it's inside information as such, but there's a claim that the managers are working 24 hours a day already. It's basically emergency stations. Do you think putting a track on the calendar so late, because it was announced, I think it was announced this year or right at the start of the year, wasn't it? Is that something that F1 really need to stay away from, or is it just it's just a one-off issue, Will?
I think that it's hard to say. I mean, I think that if they do it, they do it. If they don't, they don't. And will it be a big loss? It might even be a Vietnam. Like, there'll be some corruption, and then the only place it'll be on is on the F1 game. But I want to see it. I want to give every track a chance. Obviously, we can talk all day long about how it doesn't look good, but we have to go there and find out. And realistically, we probably will, because the money talks.
Yeah, speaking of places where money might be involved, there's also the Miami circuit next year, and for 9 following years after that. Is that there seems to be a bit of a trend, but is that something you would have expected for a new circuit? We'll go for you, Thomas. There you go.
I must say, I mean, I'm really looking forward to Miami. Obviously, second race in America. Cota's a good track, I feel, and I feel like a lot of the track layout at Miami has really been taken from other tracks. The flowing first sector, so turn 4 to about turn 8, resembles a bit the maggots and baggots of Silverstone. And so I'm really looking forward to that track. My only issue is the last complex, turn 11 to turn, I believe, 16, which I don't understand whatsoever. I really don't think we'll see any overtake there, and it looks like an Abu Dhabi Sector 3 where cars just have to follow and really have no chance to overtake. So I do have a lot of question marks about that final sector, but the rest of the circuit does seem quite interesting. Obviously, an extremely long back straight will see a lot of overtaking normally. So yeah, I mean, for now, obviously, we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen any racing, but I'm quietly confident, at least for the first 2 sectors. I'm just scared that the third sector will kind of any advantage made in the first 2 sectors will be completely ruined by the tricky nature of of turns 11 to 16.
So I'm a little bit surprised you said that, because consistently throughout the show you've been very, very much on the altitude train, and both of these tracks, Jeddah because it's right by the sea, and Miami because it's a street circuit, it's around a stadium. It'd be a bit of a pain in the arse if your car park was filled with hills. Both of those have very little altitude. Is that something that's going to be too much of a negative for you, Thomas?
I must say I don't mind a lack of altitude necessarily, even though I must say, for example, for Miami, it's kind of the same situation as Sochi, where they're just going around car parks, around stadiums. So this lack of altitude isn't an issue for now, at least. Maybe it will be if the racing isn't good, because I feel like elevation changes always provide some sort of spectacle, even if the racing is bad. But I still maintain that I believe it'll be a good track.
Okay, I'm not going to go ask you guys for ratings on these two because we haven't seen them yet. But no, in fact, I was about to ask, well, which one do you think's better? But we'll come on to that after the break. Any final words on those two tracks?
I want to talk about Miami.
All right, I'm sorry. I'm
looking forward to this one. I think 1 to 7 will be probably just a spectacle sector where the cars are going quickly, like they look cool and things like that. I'm really looking forward to 8 to 11, which is it's not a straight, but it's like one of those sort of complexes where it's just flat out. And I'll be very interested to see where they put the DRS zones on this track, especially if they put one up there. It could actually improve 11 to 16 by just allowing, because if cars go side by side there, I'd say they stay side by side for quite a while, potentially even up to 14. I mean, yeah. Would you agree with that?
I feel like if at the braking zone in turn 11 they're side by side, depending on how wide the track is, obviously, I do feel like there's potential to kind of hang it round the outside of 12, a bit like they do in Kota already with the long back straight. Then you go into a left-hander, and sometimes you can really kind of hang it around the outside there. So potentially from 11 to 14, even though I'm still unsure about that as of yet.
And then you've got 16 to 17, the long back straight. So I do think this could be a good one. I do think you've seen, possibly due to that, a bit less criticism of the circuit.
Well, I'm very surprised with how much.
There's the glitz and the glamour of Miami. It's it'll almost combine like a Monaco with a Baku, in that you'll get a glitzy, glamorous circuit. You'll see all the American influences there for absolutely no reason other than to look cool. But it will combine that with a track that, like Baku, could potentially offer up some good racing.
You've torn Jeddah a new one, and then you've been all nice about Miami. I wasn't expecting that at all. But we will have to find out what you guys think after the break. And we're back for the very final segment of the Warwick F1 show for the week. I can't speak. And this is the bit I've been looking forward to all show, where I get these guys to either fight it out, or they might be nice to each other and agree. We'll have to see. So, without further ado, I'm going to run through the first 5 races we went through, which are the ones we've seen already, either in 2020 or in 2021. And you guys have got to make 2 choices out of those to put on your magic calendars. All right, let's go. So we've got number 1, Mugello. Number 2, Nurburgring. Number 3, Imola. Number 4, Portimao. And number 5, Turkey. And I think we'll go one choice at a time. So let's start with Thomas.
Yes. Well, my first one is quite expected, seeing as though I spoke very, very highly of it. My first choice is obviously Turkey. I'd love to see that track back on the calendar.
Okay, that was that.
I can talk through it a bit more if you want.
I don't know. What do we reckon? Is that your number 1 pick? Is it?
Yeah, that's number 1. It has to be on there.
Okay. What about you, Will? What's your number 1?
It probably would be my number one as well. And I'm trying to think with a 2022 hat on as well. And I think especially turn 8, like a lot of the like when it came onto the calendar, turn 8 was a challenge because you didn't have that level of downforce. But I know Verstappen was thinking last year that they were going to go through that just easy flat. Obviously, we didn't get that with the track surface being how it was. Maybe after this weekend and we see a boring race, it might come off the number 2. But I think Turkey has always performed as a track that's a good enough track. I think none of the to be honest, I think none of these tracks would like crack my top 5 list of like the best tracks on the calendar, but I think Turkey would be a solid upper half race.
Well, there's generally reasons why they weren't on the calendar in the first place. I'm going to give my opinion as well because I've been fairly quiet all show, and the reason I'm going to give that is because my number 1 track would be the Nurburgring, and you're all going to hate on me, and it's going to be great. Go for it.
No, I think
I love the Nurburgring.
I think the Nurburgring was hampered last year because of where it was in the calendar. October is too late to have that race. It was just getting too cold. I think at one point it was threatening to snow, like during that weekend.
I just don't think it was a bad race. I don't know what race I'm remembering that you guys aren't, but I thought it was a good race. I love the Nurburgring. I love the history. I love the way the track flows. I love that hairpin going up the hill through the Schumacher S's. It's fast. It's flowing. There are good braking points. I love that. I don't know why. It's just that last corner as well. It just you hated on it, but I think
it's. Let me.
Oh, yeah, it is a hairpin.
Let me ask you a question, Jack.
Hello.
Nurburgring or Hockenheim?
I love both of them.
Ooh.
Why can't we have both?
We used to have both, didn't we? The Nurburgring was I think it was. I think the Nurburgring was the European Grand Prix.
I know at some point they'd switch. Like 1 year it would be a Hockenheim, next year after would be Nurburgring.
I think a bit earlier than that.
Maybe.
I think it was the early 2000s. We had Hockenheim and the Nurburgring. I mean, personally, if you ask me that question, I'm taking Hockenheim.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since we've seen modern F1 cars on it, so it's really difficult to say. I remember watching DTM. That's kind of where my love of German tracks especially comes from. But if it was DTM, I would take Hockenheim, I think. But I still love the Nurburgring. That's taken a turn
fine.
anyway. We're gonna move on. So that was track number 1, and we've got Turkey for the people who actually count, and Nurburgring for myself. Do you need a reminder of the rest, or
I'll be fine.
Are you good for your number 2
fine,
picks?
Yeah,
okay,
my second one.
Go for it, Thomas.
My second one is Imola. I just love the track. Racer track. Hopefully, with the new regulations, we'll also see closer racing. The drivers love it. It's in a special part of the world, obviously. Italy, it's got a lot of history. Yep, all around great track for me. Number 2 pick out of that list of 5.
What do you reckon, Will?
For variety's sake, I put 3 of the tracks at a 7 out of 10. I think, and then on different days, I think I go. But for variety's sake, I think I'll go Mugello. I think just the way the track flows really lends itself to I know I've been banging on about like qualifying tracks, but I think that's one that you can have a really good qualifying at and then still get a really good race. And especially, as you say, with the new regs coming in, it puts some of those corners on the very margin of like flat or lift. Like that's what we love about Maggots and Beckett's. It's like Pouon and like Eau Rouge. It's like, how brave are you when you go up them? And I think especially, so it's like turn 4 to turn 11 at Mugello in these cars was flat, but I think a lot of those corners in the cars that are a bit slower, less aero, could be like brilliant to watch. And that track's punishing. It will punish your mistakes. So I think I've persuaded myself now, not even for variety's sake. I think I would go for Mugello as my second option.
Okay, quick. You chose Imola, of course. Yeah, I was about to ask you which Italian one's better, but we've got a very clear answer on that one. I think my number 2 is going to be Turkey because it is a good race. I'm really looking forward to it as well. Which means we've got one final selection to go. So just a reminder, you can pick Zandvoort, you can pick Miami, or you can pick Jeddah. And we'll just get to it, Thomas.
Okay, so I'm going to pick... This was a hard one to choose between two. You probably know which ones the two are. But I'm going to pick Zandvoort.
Wow.
Yes, I probably know what you're going to pick, but I'd still pick Zandvoort. Obviously, atmosphere is absolutely great. It's a track I'd love to go to. The banking is something unique in F1, and I'm putting a lot of trust in these new regulations. Hopefully, in the bankings, we'll be able to see people taking different lines and just experimenting a lot more, and such a flowing track. So I'd put Zandvoort as my pick.
Go on then, Will.
Well, based on the fact that I've really dissed two of these three circuits, I think I have to stick with my guns and go for Miami. I do think so F1 released a video of the track. It doesn't look great. I think they need to make it a lot wider, like just for the space. Obviously, that'll the issues will be brought down a bit because the cars are getting a bit narrower. But I think Miami looks like a good one, and put that please, if anyone at F1 is listening, not that you are, but please put that race at night, because that race at night will look spectacular under the lights. Like, you've got a stadium in place. It's basically in a car park. You've got the car park lights. If you put that race at night, it will be 10 times better, because I was saying this during the debate. People give Singapore so much more leeway, because it is one of those. It is a night race and looks so much better. So, to be honest, I will have to go for Miami, and I will have to say, please put Miami at night.
Okay, I'm going to finish it off with mine, and then immediately we're going to have to leave because we're about to run out of time, which is fortunate because I don't want to go to Miami because it's a second American race, and I've already made my opinion on second races in countries clear, and I don't want to go to Zandvoort because it's awful. Which leaves me with the unfortunate situation of saying I would pick Jeddah.
How dare you?
Wow, okay.
All right. There you have it. I think we're going to have to wrap up because there is a show after us as well. Thank you very much for listening. My name's Jack Rowe.
My name's Will Kingswood.
I'm Thomas Loubeyres.
And thank you for watching. We will see you next week. You can tune in again at the same time. You can watch the podcast back on the Raw Sport Spotify or on Warwick F1 Society's YouTube. And sayonara.